some annoying YouTuber decided to ask us to swap our phones. My husband then decided to divorce me. I decided to play one of those dangerous couple games on the streets, and now I am heading towards the most messy and depressing divorce because my husband found my deepest secret during the game. My name is Tracy, and I'm a personal shopper. I'm a married woman, as you might have guessed from the intro. I've been married for nearly 6 years now. My husband's name is Jason, and he's a realtor. I'd like to say that all the names I'll be using here are completely fake because I do not want to risk our privacy. My husband is 7 years old this year, and he's just 2 years older than me. We live in Washington, D.C., by the way, and we recently moved into our own property. Well, Jason bought a new property. We've rented all through our marriage until recently. His job has always required time and travel, so we decided to wait till we're stable enough and have a clear view of the future before getting a property. Now that I'm about to tell you all how my marriage is on the verge of crumbling, I think it's only right to let you know if my marriage has always been bad. I feel disgusted because it is also thanks to Jason that I have a substantial career today. He has played a huge part in my success, and I am not scared to admit that. Well, to put it in the most vulgar way, I freaking messed up, and I am the cause of my marriage's downfall. Yes, I am the villain in this story, but I swear that I have not always been that way. 6 years ago, after saying yes to my husband at the altar, I knew I found a man that would genuinely love me. Jason and I found each other because we had always been searching for lifetime partners even before meeting. So, when we found each other, it became a dating spark that couldn't end no matter how we tried. By the time I met him, I was not at the peak of my career as a personal shopper yet, but I was doing just fine. I had my own little apartment by then, and I was taking good care of myself. Jason, on the other hand, had a little bit of stability, even more than me. He was a focused young man who had principles and wanted to work harder every day. Our professional values and personal values intertwined perfectly, and after just 2 years of dating, we got married. Even though he traveled a lot, it was never a problem for me because I was also busy with my own work. Plus, I already knew about the requirements of his job before we tied the knot. Jason also made sure he explained that his job required time and asked if I was okay with that. I knew what I was getting myself into before marriage, so it was not a problem for me. Along the line, I got more invested in my own job too. Like I said earlier, I wasn't at the peak of my career when I met him. I was just working to make a living. But with Jason's influence and just seeing the way he never broke his work principles, I took my job more seriously and dedicated my free time to trying to become better at what I did. With my determination, I was able to start getting more recommendations. I became so good at what I did that I started choosing the days I preferred to work and the clients I preferred to work with. For someone that happily said yes to every appointment before, having the choice to decline if I felt like I wasn't satisfied was great. With that new height of success for me, I was grateful to Jason. Junior always gave me talks about how being at the peak of one's career can either make you or break you. He would tell me stories about his own work life and advise me most times. It felt good to have someone I could trust and someone who reasonably excelled at what he did as my personal coach. All that made our marriage grow even stronger, and there was never the problem of him working too much because I was also working too much. We were both engaged in our work, so no one felt left out. And the best part was that, after work, we found a way to make time for each other. Not just any time, but quality time. We always made a chance to go on dates and do everything other couples did, even though we had to schedule it. Jason never joked with the chance to meet and see me. He took his role as the provider and the head of the family very seriously, and I admired how responsible he was. The topic of having kids came up several times, and the topic was either initiated by him or me. But we always amicably decided that having his wasn't at the top of our list at the time. But 3 years after our marriage, we have kids. I had our first child 3 years ago. After having our daughter, we decided to pause on having kids for some time. We made the decision to only have 2 kids and that we would start trying for the second one in some time. Just right in time before I approached 40. So you can see that we work together, right? We think together, and there was never a time anyone tried to make their own opinion superior. I felt secure in my marriage, and I always knew that I was in the right hands no matter what. There was no doubt, hate, or deceit. I believed I had the perfect marriage for the longest time until the cracks started to form. Where there is a crack, there definitely has to be someone who initiated it. And yes, my stupid freaking brain is the one that ruined what was the most secure marriage ever. It all started about a year ago. It's been a year since I decided to be the most foolish woman on planet Earth. A year since I became a part of the most questionable extramarital affair ever. Oh my God, I cannot believe how much I have messed up. I am utterly disappointed in myself. My hands are shaking as I write this. I have stared at the screen for days without hanging the courage to share my story, because I sometimes ask if this is a story worth sharing from my end. I feel like I messed up too much and I am just ashamed of myself. Too ashamed that each time I remember what I did and how I ruined my marriage, the self-guilt and disbelief piles up in my heart. I know I deserve it. I know I deserve no pity, in fact. My greediness brought me what I deserved, so what can I say? Like I have mentioned almost a million times already, I wasn't at the peak of my career until after my marriage to Jason. He basically pioneered my career's success. Bringing him around, having his support, and coaching me in this position today, and when I got to this position, I got lured into misusing it. I find it disgusting that I cheated on him using what he decided to help me build. In case you have guessed already, then you must know that I am talking about my job. As a personal shopper, your job is basically to purchase things, mostly clothing accessories for your clients. Some clients prefer ghost shopping in the sense that they do not want to meet you. Some prefer to see who they're working with or even be with you during the purchase process so they can see what actually works for them and what they want to go with. All you need to do in a situation like that is to support them and just basically give your take on what they need and how they should go about it. So, about a year ago, a client of mine introduced me to another client. I trust that client because we had worked together even before I got to the prime of my career, and we had known each other for long. So when she introduced me to the new client, I was more than happy to see her. Yes, the new client was a male. It wasn't the first time I worked with men. Though over 60% of my clients were women, I also worked with men a lot. So it wasn't the first time, and I really didn't see anything wrong with working with a man that time again. It was just that I had no idea that I was going to be working with a very flirty man. He's reasonably successful in his field of work. I don't want to mention what he does, but he's a successful man. He's very good looking and also has a very dominating presence attached to him. When we first met, he made it clear that our contract was going to be long-term since he had been on the lookout for a long-term personal shopper. He told me his friend, who was my longtime client, referred to him and that he trusted my abilities because of her. All he said were normal procedures, so I didn't care to think of it as anything else. But, just like you would guess, I discovered that he was going to require a lot of my time. It was almost like I was working every other day, and it became a full-time contract. For me, I never really got into full-time contracts because first of all, I had several contacts already, and I also had a very busy schedule. I also cherished the moments I had with Jason, so getting into a full-time contract and jeopardizing that was never in my cards. I made this clear to the new client. Dan and I made him understand that there was no way I could work as frequently as he expected me to work. But even after an explanation, Dan was still focused on me getting into a full-time contract. He offered more money just to get me to accept his offer. I still said no because a full-time contract was not in my cards, but after dragging things back and forth, he finally decided to cut down my work hours and still left the pay as it was. He was a high-end contract and I knew his referral would go a long way, so I decided to accept his proposal. I came to the conclusion that since the work hours weren't going to be that much and the pay was reasonably more than I'd ever had, it was only right to say yes. Guys, I promise that I had no idea of what I was getting myself into. I always prioritized my marriage no matter what, and I never intentionally went into anything that would put that in jeopardy. I had all this in mind before getting into that contract. So, to be honest, I never knew Dan had other intentions. The contract was different, so I started spending a lot of time with him. When I say a lot of time, I actually mean a lot of time. At first, it started from just work, like strict work, but going forward, it became something else. Dan would either ask me to wait after my work hours with him for a coffee or a cold drink. I never accepted at first. I was always skeptical and made the point of saying no because I didn't think it was appropriate. Dan would try to make me understand that he had no ill intentions and just wanted to make me relax since he felt like I was stressed. After weeks of saying no, I started saying yes. I would just take the drink and leave right after because I was really stressed. But after I said yes to his drinks, he started texting me. Normally our texts were all about work and our next meeting, but it progressed to texting outside of work. You might want to ask, why didn't you just stop it when you noticed things were getting unprofessional? I feel like I ask myself the same question all the time. Why was I so dumb? Why didn't I just stop? What was the need to keep going when I knew it could only lead to disaster? I also ask myself these things, and I have to accept that I was too foolish. I acted like a child, and I shouldn't have let things get too far. When the unprofessional text sprung up, I started entertaining it after some time. He would ask how my day was, and if it wasn't too stressful. I would reply him detailing how stressful it was. Our appointments were usually not every day. It was mostly like 3 times in a week, so we didn't see each other every single day. 3 times a week is huge compared to the time I spend with other clients. Normal contracts were usually just once a week. Before I go on, I'd like to remind you all about the dynamic between Jason and I. I told you guys he works and travels a lot, right? I also made it clear that it had never been a problem for me because I was also always busy and had a lot going on with my work. But since my contract with Dan, things actually changed. Dan was paying for most of my time, even though he cut off most of the work hours. I didn't take in other clients during the duration of our contract because he was paying enough, and due to the gravity of our work hours, I prioritized my rest more. I didn't take in new clients, but I kept my old ones, which meant I had more free time on my hands than I ever did before. With the new free time, and I dare say wisdom, this has actually changed. I started to notice Jason's absence in my life. Yes, I actually started to notice his absence. You might wonder why that suddenly happened. Well, that's what I just explained. I usually had no time to notice his absence because of work, but since I started to notice it over having less work on my hands, my mind drifted to places it shouldn't have drifted to. I started to feel the empty space and the need to get someone to fill it. Whenever Jason was at work and I called, it was absurd for the both of us. Firstly, because I never really used to call him before. I never felt the need because I had too much on my hands. We mostly texted because we both knew we were busy. So, with my daughter in school and me alone at home, I started calling and texting more than I usually did. Jason never complained, but with time, I noticed that he got confused and started questioning things. When I noticed that, I decided to stop calling him too much. I knew it was unfair of me to act that way, because I was aware that his work required his time, so me calling him too much was destabilizing him. I had to be reasonable, so I stopped calling. Instead of speaking to him about the change in my professional life, I just kept it to myself, because I felt like I was diverting from the plans we had already made together. I know you guys can already see where this is going. Whenever I felt the space, I ran to Dan for help. I don't mean literally, I just mean that I would either text him or reply to his texts. Most of our relationship actually happened on the phone because we texted a lot. Firstly, it was just friendly tests that didn't seem to have any harm to them, but then it proceeded to more bold and vulgar texts, and there were just so many things wrong with the things we said to each other in those texts. I got really attached to him, and the more we texted, the more that attachment grew. I started looking forward to our work hours together, and I started staying back longer after work. It was becoming a full-blown situationship, but I was too immersed in it to stop and use my rational mind. I just kept on going without stopping, and he almost became my boyfriend. Because we were basically texting and calling like two lovebirds in a relationship, I forgot I was married. I don't mean literally, but I did act like I wasn't married with a child. Oh, poor Jason had no idea of what was going on. In his mind, his wife was just working just like she usually did. There was this particular day when Dan finally got the courage to ask me out on a date. I was shook to say the least because I didn't expect him to get so forward yet. I accepted his offer after thinking about it for some time. After the first date, we started going on more dates. From one date, it sprung into another one, and just like that, we were just going on dates. With time, we got comfortable kissing, hugging, and then I slept with him. I did it not once, twice, or 3 times. It was like I was in a full-blown extramarital affair. Jason had no idea about it. In fact, no one did. I went against my professional policies to be with Dan. I should never have crossed the boundaries, but at that point, I didn't seem to have any common sense left in me. Dan and I went everywhere together and did almost everything together. Even when I was supposed to be working, he would tell me there was no need. He splashed gifts on me. But before I go on, I'd like to make it clear that it wasn't the gifts I got from Dan that made me cheat on my husband. It was never the gifts, to be honest. I had my own money and a basin provided for me. I was living great and there was no need for me to get greedy. I just got stupid and did things without common sense. It was never about the money. I never revealed anything about my extramarital affair to Jason because I was well aware that he was not going to take it lightly when he discovered the truth. So I left him in the dark and practically gaslighted him throughout the duration of my relationship with Dan. So just 2 months ago, my contract with Dan officially ended. He was done with his project and everything he needed was sorted. It was supposed to end almost 3 months ago, but he drew it out just to spend more time with me. After the contact ended, he had to travel for something important, so we couldn't really see physically. We just texted and video called all the time. I took a little leave from work after he traveled because I was overwhelmed with emotions. My life had slowly started taking its previous shape and I was realizing my mistakes. It was overbearing just thinking about what I'd done and looking back on my affair with Dan. The guilt started getting stronger, and even though we were still in contact, I found it unbearable to keep talking to him. But he didn't stop. He kept texting romantically, and when he noticed I was drifting, he would send romantic pictures we took together before. Just 2 weeks ago, something drastic happened. Jason usually took leaves off work once in a year, and it was usually towards the end of the year. But when he noticed that I took a leave of absence from work, he decided to take a leave early so we could spend time together. The new proximity was killing me with guilt, but I had no choice but to endure it all. So since we had a lot of time on our hands, we decided to go out. It was a random decision, but we decided to go out very late at night 2 weeks ago. My mother babysitted our daughter while we were out and about. After walking around and eating randomly, we decided to sit and get some rest. While sitting, a man approached us with a phone and a speaker, and we could visibly see someone recording him. I instantly knew it was one of those YouTubers who went around interviewing people on the streets. I'd seen some of their videos, and I knew it had to be one of those annoying interviews. I wanted to walk away, but Jason asked me to stay so we could see what they were up to. I'll have to stop here today, guys. This is as far as I can write for now since I'm being overcome with emotions. I'll update this soon. Please bear with me.
Updated.
Thank you all for your patience. It's been 4 months now. I'll update you on everything that has happened, and also continue from where I stopped previously. So the YouTuber we met asked us to play a couples game where we swapped phones to test our trust in each other. I immediately knew it was a bad idea and wanted to pull out, but then Jason was so interested in the game that he agreed to it. I wanted to use the "I trust my husband too much to play such games" card, but it didn't work. We swapped phones before I could blink, and he checked my phone. I checked his too because we were being recorded and I didn't want to seem suspicious. My hands were shaking and I could barely breathe because I knew what was coming. I never deleted the text with Dan because I had no idea a day where Jason and I would switch phones would come. Less than 5 minutes after scrolling through my phone, Jason on the stream threw my phone on the ground and left me with the YouTuber. I ran after him, but he warned me not to follow him, or else he would do something that both of us would regret. When I got to the house that night, he refused to unlock the door for me. I got a text from him saying he had filed for divorce and wanted me out of his life. I knew what he had seen, but I still wanted a chance to make things right. No matter what I said or did, even after using our daughter as an excuse for us not to get a divorce, he refused. He eventually sent me out of the house and I had to rent a hotel. I had tried my best, and I even went as far as begging my parents to help, but Jason had refused to budge. I became devastated and depressed, and I even went as far as sneaking up to the house to beg him. He refused to give me access to our daughter and went as far as fighting for custody. I went through a lot because I really wanted him to forgive him. He was the best husband anyone could have asked for, and I regret taking him for granted. Eventually, I got 50% custody, but our divorce was traumatic. It has to be the worst phase of my life. I cried myself to sleep every night, and I still cry myself to sleep. He has refused to speak to me even with the divorce in process. My life is ruined, and I don't know what to do. It's even hard to get back to work, and even though I cut things off with Dan, I still can't get my life back together. I have lost my home all because I took my marriage for granted. I didn't know what I had until I lost it.